Hello and welcome back. It has been a minute since we last uploaded, and a lot has happened in the interim. Among those things, I have committed to a new career path, and it's been something I've been wanting to share, and I did try filming a few times. But I think perhaps because I hadn't straightened out my own thoughts and feelings, and I was experiencing some imposter syndrome, so I wasn't sure what value I could offer you guys by turning on the camera. For those of you who might be new here, I was previously a litigation and arbitration lawyer for over 6 years. And after several years of deliberation, I quit shortly before I turned 30 to embark on a journey to try to find a career that I actually liked. Turns out, quitting was only the beginning. That was 3 years ago now, and after a tumultuous journey, a YouTube channel, and an unexpected career pivot, I am now comfortable saying that I am on a new career path that I genuinely enjoy. Before I talk more about that though, it's occurred to me that I've shared on this channel my reasons for quitting my job as a lawyer and why I didn't like being a lawyer. But I've never really sat down to expressly talk about what happens after quitting, the figuring out what to do next. Because unless you quit with the intention of retiring, you do still need to figure out what you want to do to make a living. So how do you do that if you don't already know? And I didn't when I quit. While I can't answer that for anyone or provide some handy 10-step plan for how to figure out a new career, I can share a few things I learned which I felt like made a big difference. So if you're currently thinking of quitting your job to find a new career, or you've already done so, hopefully these will help. First is that you do not need to know where you're going in order to start your journey. A question that used to plague me, and which I think is commonly expressed by people who don't like their careers and are thinking about possibly quitting and changing is, but I don't know what else I would do. And that's based on the premise that one must identify some destination or end goal before they start making that change. I mean, I think if you've already identified another job or career path or industry that you want to get into, then great. But if you don't, which I didn't, the catch-22 of waiting until you know what change you want to make is that often we aren't even able to identify what we like or what other viable options might be on the table until we actually go and try them. That knowledge just simply cannot be gained without experience. Using myself as an example, there's no way that I could have known 3 years ago when I did quit that I would enjoy the role that I currently have today because, for starters, I literally didn't even know it existed 3 years ago. And frankly, if someone would have told me my current job description 3 years ago, that it would be very people heavy and involve a lot of networking and events and interpersonal relationships, I probably would have not even considered it. Because back then, I still had the belief that I wouldn't be suited for this kind of role as an introvert. So you could say a secondary lesson here is that you don't know until you try, or don't knock it until you try it. And even if you do quit your job and embark on a career change with a clear plan, as the saying goes, the best laid plans often go awry. I mean, I know that's not literally the saying, but you know what I mean. At the end of the day, there are so many variables in life, and life isn't static. It's dynamic and ever-changing, and it really is not possible to always plan everything precisely. On top of that, there's not only one right or good version of what your career could be or look like. And it's not like life is some kind of test where unless you manage to identify and pick the right option, you'll fail. Instead, I thought it was more helpful and constructive to focus on the process and the experience of figuring it out rather than identifying some specific destination or goal like I mentioned earlier. Which then brings me to my next point, which is more about the process itself. And that is to approach with curiosity. So upon quitting, I only really knew 2 things. 1, I did not like and did not want to remain a lawyer in private practice. And 2, I've always been a relatively creative person who enjoys the visual arts. Painting, photography, drawing, fashion, you name it. So I knew that ideally it would be nice to try something with a creative element. But frankly, aside from those things, I had no other information or data to use as a guide. For background, when I was 18, I went straight from graduating high school to going into law school, and after that went straight into private practice. So I really knew nothing else. As a result, I needed to do some exploring and experimenting to get more information and learn more about myself. And this is where curiosity comes into play. By curiosity, I don't just mean having an interest in trying new things or putting yourself in new situations, although those are definitely a part of it. I'm also referring to being open-minded about who you are as a person and what your career and your life could look like. For instance, I like being creative, but creativity can take many forms. Initially, I took it very literally, thinking that if I like the visual arts, then I will create something visual. And then that's one of the reasons as to why this YouTube channel with Lloyd came about. However, getting in front of a camera and also talking to a camera were very, very far outside of my comfort zone. But regardless, I wanted to pursue it because I was curious. What happens if I try doing this, even though it involves me doing things that I really never envisioned myself doing? What I learned from content creation and this channel could be the topic of a whole nother video, but in this context, I did learn something very important about what gives me satisfaction from my work. And that is that I really value feeling like I'm building something, another version of creation, which I never felt when I was working as a lawyer in private practice. Of course, I also generally preferred the act of making a video as opposed to drafting legal documents, but I didn't need to start a YouTube channel to learn that. That was a very important piece of information or data that I gleaned, and I could only get that through experience and experimentation. A book that I think really elegantly frames these concepts is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. In short, the authors take the view that the same thinking responsible for the design of all of the technologies and the products and the spaces that you see around you can also be used to design your life and your career as well. Why, you might ask? Because design is an adaptable process that allows you to continue to change the outcome as you get more data. I personally really like this analogy because there's no way that I would have learned what I want and don't want from my work if it were not for letting my curiosity guide me so that I take action and try new things and gain what the book calls prototype experiences, so I have more information to plan my way forward. Now, for those of you wondering, what am I doing now 3 years later after quitting? What on earth is practice development for barristers? Give me a moment because my camera battery is dying. Sorry, a little equipment change. So the simplest way to describe what I do now is that it's like a form of business development and marketing for a specific type of lawyer, namely barristers. In case you're not familiar with what a barrister is, the legal profession in Hong Kong, which takes after the UK, is split into solicitors and barristers. Very generally speaking, solicitors are the lawyers that you find working in law firms, like what Lloyd and I were doing before. I was a solicitor specializing in litigation and arbitration, and Lloyd was a solicitor specializing in mergers and acquisitions. For me, even though I specialized in litigation and arbitration, and sometimes I did go to court myself, I had limited rights of audience, aka I could only show up and speak in court myself up to a certain level. Barristers, on the other hand, and broadly speaking, specialize in advocacy for disputes and have rights of audience to attend and speak in court hearings at all levels. So as a solicitor before, we would engage barristers for a variety of things, but primarily for their advocacy in court or arbitration hearings. Barristers are also the ones who wear wigs. I will throw a photo up here, whereas solicitors do not. Additionally, unlike being a solicitor at a law firm in which you are an employee of that firm, barristers are all self-employed and operate instead in groups called chambers. And that is where I work now, at Chambers, and I manage marketing and BD for the chambers as a whole, as well as the individual barristers within. I think this role has given me quite a unique and interesting opportunity to utilize all of my experience in a way that I did not expect. My time in private practice allows me to understand this part of the legal industry and market, and also to communicate with barristers because we speak the same language, so to say. At the same time, I can bring what I learned about branding and marketing and visuals, graphics, etc. from building this YouTube channel. Which brings me to my final point, which is that nothing goes to waste. To be fair, this is not exactly something new I learned, I was just very much reminded of how true it is. On the face of it, being a lawyer and then building and running a YouTube channel seems so drastically different in terms of skill set that I always kind of assumed that whatever next career I tried to pursue, I would always have to lean more in one direction or the other, as opposed to combining the two, if that makes sense. I definitely would not ever have imagined before that there would be any role that would value both of those seemingly disparate skill sets and that I would be able to bring those skill sets together. But lo and behold, they have. This one's not that complicated, to be honest. I think it just really helps to remember that even if you can't tell how an experience you're going through now will benefit you down the road, or if you're currently unwilling to give something up because of the amount of time and effort that went into it, or even if you just can't see how the dots in your life will connect together, just remember, nothing goes to waste. Even if all you got from an experience was learning that something wasn't for you, then I still think it's not a waste because you learned something, you got some new data. All of my experiences, whether good or bad, have had a part to play in shaping who I am and preparing me for what lies ahead, even if I don't really know what that is yet. And in any event, I think it's often the case that you can't connect the dots in life when you look forwards, only backwards. So I think there is a good deal to be said for trusting the process. Easier said than done, of course, but every once in a while when I have another existential crisis, I always come back to this. These lessons or concepts have benefited me a lot both professionally and personally, and they have helped me grow into myself a lot as a person, especially in the last few years. So if you want to quit or you've quit and you don't know what's next, just remember that you're not alone. If this kind of topic is something you're interested in hearing more about, do let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.